the art of being rich and what you can do to get there. So one day, me and my wife, we were sitting down on the couch watching TV, and we saw this show come up on Netflix called How to Get Rich. And I would advise you to check it out. It's a great show. And as we were watching the show, the main guy, the host, if you will, he had this one question that he kept asking all the people that was helping to get rich. And to give you a little bit of backstory about this movie, about the show, was that this guy who's a financial guru, he goes and he helps people from all different backgrounds in order to become rich, to get them out of debt. So he's working with some people who are just your typical middle class families, if you will, trying to help them to get out of debt. But he's also working with people who are well below, like, let's say, like the national average, if you will, right? Like almost in poverty, if you will. And then he's also working with people who makes a lot of money, but still is having a tough time managing their money. So I want to say that because I want you to see that it's from different levels, if you will. You have people that are not making a lot of money that's still going through financial woes, people that are middle class that are going through financial woes, and then people who are really wealthy, right? And in the show, there's this lady that's shopping almost every other weekend in the Beverly Hills and all that other like places, if you will, like Rodeo Drive, like just shopping like real big. Like they're still struggling with financial woes. And this guy, he goes and he helps them to manage their finances. And within every first conversation he has with them, he asks them this key question. It's a question that I want to ask you. He says, what does a rich life look like for you? And the reason why he asks that is because he has this motto, if you will, where he says, I want you to be frugal in the areas that don't really matter that much to you, so that you can be really extravagant in the areas that really do mean a lot to you. So I'll give you an example. If you're someone who doesn't really care about cars, clothes, shoes, things like that, but you really love vacations, he'll tell you, hey, it's more than okay to get the car that's a few years old, or to get the shoes that maybe you can get from, let's say, like, I'm just going to say something like Target or something like that, right? Like something that's not really expensive. Like that's his whole goal, so that you can save the money, so that you can take that trip to Bali, Paris, right, Jamaica, wherever you want to go, right? That's his whole premise. So we're watching this show, me and my wife, and we decided to answer that question ourselves. We said, what does a rich life look like for you, and what does it look like for me? So we go and we answer the questions, and we keep watching the show. So then a few weeks later, me and my wife, we had to go and we had to run an errand, right? We had to go to the bank because we had to cash a check. So we decided, let's both take our son to daycare, something that we normally don't do together because it's like a one-man task, if you will. But we're like, hey, let's both take him so that way we can both go and take care of this errand. So our son, he goes to daycare in the downtown Fort Lauderdale area. So when we take him down there, we're able to go to a bank that's in downtown Fort Lauderdale. So we go to the bank, and we actually ended up finishing what we need to do at the bank relatively fast. So me and my wife, we look at the time and we see that, man, we have a couple hours to kill. So we decided, you know what? Let's just go down walking down the street. And as we're walking down the street, I look across and I see this amazing restaurant, right? And it says breakfast on the top, right? It was around like 9 a.m. So I was like, hey, do you want to go get breakfast? And she was like, sure, why not? So we go and we get breakfast. And as we're sitting down in this restaurant, you know, we're sitting outside, we're sitting like on the street, if you will. And we look up, and we just had this both silly smile on our faces. We're both looking at the menu. We're looking at each other, right? We're just enjoying each other's time, right? And what's beautiful about that moment was that we didn't have to worry about a task, right? We didn't have to worry about work stuff. We didn't have to worry about chores around the house. We didn't have to worry if our son was pooping in his pants, or why he's crying, or, you know, if he needs to be fed. You know, we were just kind of able to sit there and just enjoy each other's presence. And what that moment was for me was, it was my rich moment. It was my rich life. Something that I love doing is being in the downtown areas. I'm originally from South Carolina, and even though it's from the South, we still have big cities, okay? I don't want you to think that I live in some rural town where there's no street lights or anything like that. Like, no, I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, the capital of South Carolina. So still a big city, right? But even within living in that big city, I knew I wanted a city that was even bigger. And that's why I moved to Miami. And being in the downtown Miami area, being in the downtown Fort Lauderdale area, like, that's something that I really enjoy. And as we're sitting there, we look up and we're like, yo, like, look at us, right? It's Tuesday. It's 10 a.m. and we're sitting at a restaurant just enjoying each other's company, right? Something so small felt so incredibly rich to both of us. And for me, that was my rich life. Now, why am I asking this? Why am I saying all of these things, right? I'm saying this because a few reasons, so I want you to bear with me. One of those reasons is that it doesn't take much for you to have a rich life. And I know when I started this podcast, you may have been thinking, okay, maybe Coach Wells is going to give me some financial advice. And I could, but I want to tell you, money in the right context can make you a rich person. Money in the wrong context can still leave you as a poor person. So even if you had $10 million, $100 million, but in the wrong context, right? So let's say it's $100 million is what you had, but in the context of having really, really poor health, or in the context of not having a happy family, right? Or in the context of just simply feeling like you're still not good enough. That is still a poor life. Even if you had $10, $1,000, whatever it is to your name, but it's in the right context, right? In the context of happy family, you're feeling fulfilled, all these things, right? You would feel just as rich, or one would even say richer, than someone who has 10 times, 100 times as much money as you. Because it's all about the context that we have this money in. And that is the secret to having a rich life. Now, for you that's listening, I want to ask you a question, right? What does a rich life look like for you? What does a rich life look like for you? Now, here's something that's interesting about that meal, that breakfast that me and my wife had. You know, we've had breakfast tons of times, right? Like we've done that like tons and tons of times, right? Even having like breakfast like or dinner or whatever, like in a restaurant, in a nice restaurant. But here's the thing that helps. Me and her, we took the time to actually ask ourselves, what does a rich life look like? And because we had this on our mind, we was able to catch the richness of that moment. Because if we didn't, that moment would have passed by us and we wouldn't even known it. So here's what I'm trying to say. In order to have a rich life, you also have to have awareness about what this rich life looks like. Because if not, these riches could be passing you by each and every day and you not even know it. So again, I ask, what does a rich life look like for you? It doesn't take that much, and you'd be surprised how close you are to having a rich life. Now, what I love telling people when I tell them this story is that at the end of the day, this meal, it only costs $54, right? How often do you spend that money, right? Probably pretty often, right? Like you probably spend that on groceries, and one could probably even say it's just a few things for groceries, right? You probably spend that putting gas in your car. There's so many different things you could have used for that $54, things that we could have used for that $54. But in the context of sharing each other's time, being in the downtown Fort Lauderdale area, just enjoying breakfast, like all that stuff, right? It made us feel really, really rich, if you will. So that is the purpose of this podcast. I want you to start to think, what does a rich life look like for you? Once you have that answer, I want you to go out there and see if you can notice it. See if you can touch it, if you will. And you'd be surprised how little it takes to make you feel rich. This is Coach Wells. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you can get more information like this. And guys, I'll see you later.